From Grangeville to Lapway, we've got your District 2 breakdown right here on the Palouse Prepcast with Garrison Hardie.
That's right. It's another edition of the Palouse Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down everything that's going on in District 2 in the state of Idaho. The Palouse Prepcast is now brought to you by the Idaho Division of Public Health. So thanks to our new sponsor. I'm Brandon Baney. The gentleman staring at me into the camera is Garrison Hardie. Garrison, what's going on? How has your week been so far?
It's been fantastic thus far. The weather up here in Moscow has gotten very cold, however. But then again, as I've mentioned before on other shows, as a ginger, this is my time of year. It's time to thrive. Let's go, baby.
Yeah, you were at we'll talk more about the game specifically in a little bit as we run it down, but you were at Logos on Saturday for their game against Clearwater. It looked like it was a really good time. It was their 40th birthday?
That's correct. It was Logos's 40th anniversary since its founding. And after the game was over, they had a fried chicken picnic, which, I mean, my gosh, that's fantastic. And then they also had a concert. They had numerous speakers lined up. They had a local business here in town, Williburger, who, by the way, gives us burgers every time we go out there for free. So it was just a great time. And there was a good bit of people out there for after the game just showing up for that event. So all in all, it was a great crowd, great atmosphere, and Logos has a foundation for stuff going forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't even realize it had been 40 years. That's right. A good benchmark.
Absolutely. A lot of history. And you and I have talked before, a lot of history for other sports like cross country, basketball, stuff of that nature, even lacrosse. So there's a lot of excitement around the football team.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to what happened to Logos in just a little bit, but I think we have to start the conversation with that wild back and forth overtime shootout between Sandpoint and Lewiston. The Bulldogs win by 42-41 in overtime, in the process handing the Bengals their first loss of the season. But man, what a game.
Oh, what a fantastic game. You and I've gotten the chance to watch Lewiston numerous times throughout the season, and their offense has been on a tear. It looked no different in that game, of course. Unfortunately, it just so happened they put up one less point than Sandpoint. We knew going into that game that it was going to be a tough contest for both of these teams, and there was no separation between them, back and forth throughout. And it just so happened that Sandpoint got the edge at the very end. But what a wild contest. I would have loved to see that.
Yeah. And in fact, Lewiston, had a 2-score lead in the second half. They were up 34-21, and Sandpoint came roaring back. They've got a great junior quarterback, Parker Pettit. He threw a 69-yard touchdown pass to all-state running back Garrett Cox. And then so that made it 34-27. And then they scored again late in regulation on a 1-yard quarterback sneak to tie the game at 34. And so Lewiston, you would think going to overtime wouldn't have the momentum, but the Bengals in overtime score on their opening possession, right? Jace McArcher throws a 4-yard touchdown pass to James White, who was all over this game. That's a guy we haven't talked about too much this year, James White. He's a great versatile player on that Bengals offense. And so Lewiston jumps in front 41-34. Could the Bengals get one more stop? They couldn't. Sandpoint scored in their overtime possession. Pettit found Max Frank for a 6-yard touchdown, and then Bulldogs going for 2, right? It's a big gamble, Garrison. You go for 2 and you get it. You're the hero. You don't get it, and you can ask Blackfoot about this. Blackfoot has 3 losses this year. 2 of them have come because they've decided to go for 2 in the win, and they haven't gotten it. So Sandpoint gets the 2-point conversion as Pettit hooked up with Ari Vandenberg. And so to the winner go the spoils. But Lewiston has nothing to be disappointed about from that game.
Not at all. No, both are just a hard-fought game between 2 solid football teams at the end of the day. And, it just so happened that Sandpoint, I think the coaching staff did a fantastic job of reading the momentum of that game and realizing that they had the opportunity to go ahead and punch it in and go for the win. Gutsy call but a smart call. I think it kind of reminds me of the Boise State versus Oklahoma scenario, where Coach Peterson just read that situation and decided, you know what, we're going to send it. Let's go for it right now for the win. And I like it because with a talented team like Lewiston, with all those weapons you mentioned, McArcher, Cruz Hepburn, James White, Elliott Taylor, there's just so many options on that team. Jared Jelinek, can't forget to leave him out. There's so many options and weapons on that team that the longer you allow a game with them to go on, the more opportunities they're going to have to cause some damage. So from Sandpoint's view, I thought that was a really smart call. But again, like you mentioned, Lewiston has no reason to hang their heads about that. Great game. On to the next one, which, by the way, is another team out of Sandpoint's conference, Moscow.
That's right. So I guess the one question for Lewiston coming out of this game, and I love the comparison you made to that Fiesta Bowl between Boise State and Oklahoma, because that is exactly what it kind of reminded me of. So the big question, I guess, for Lewiston is, when you've got a 34-21 lead in the second half, how do you next time close the game out? You know, every game they've been in so far, they've kind of run away from the opposition. They haven't really had a close game yet where they've had to learn how to make plays in tight situations. So it'll be interesting to see moving forward if Lewiston's in another close contest. You know, will they be able to close it out? Will they be able to burn that clock? I think they had some short possessions, which allowed Sandpoint to kind of rally back and get their feet under them. But
right. Well, first, you got to, like you said, you got to give credit to Sandpoint's defense for bowing up and making those key stops there in those key possessions. However, from Lewiston's standpoint, it's really kind of tough when you're in a fast-paced offense that wants to be on the ball and get the next playoff within the next 8 to 10 seconds once you're lined up. It's kind of tough to shift mentality to, okay, maybe we should slow down, because in practice, they're probably drilling, we got to stay fast. The whole practice is predicated on speed, and they're just practicing that throughout. Their defense is going against that throughout. So to suddenly grind that to a halt when you have the lead and the advantage and you want to use time to your advantage, it's really hard to shift out of that mentality of go, go, go. And that's something Coach Pancari, I'm sure, is already thinking about is, okay, how can we close down these leads, especially as games against some tough competition comes up with conference games coming up here in the near future. So I guess that it's really up to the coaching staff to preach, okay, when we've got this advantage, composure needs to come into the forefront here. Just focus on one play at a time, moving the ball forward a little bit and keeping that clock rolling. First downs are key. So every play needs to be smart, well-designed, which Coach Pancari does a great job of that, he and his offensive coordinator. And then they just need to go out and execute with maybe a little bit more caution. But again, Sandpoint did a great job of coming up with big plays when they needed it.
Absolutely. And so, as you mentioned, for Lewiston, now they turn around and take on Moscow in the great rivalry game there between Inland Empire League teams. Of course, Lewiston 5A, Moscow 4A. Moscow had a tough game Friday night. They had to travel to Lake City to play the Timberwolves, another 5A program out of Coeur d'Alene. They fell 26-14, and the turnovers is what really hurt Moscow in this game. Leon Hutton at quarterback, 18 of 34 for 169 yards, but he threw 4 interceptions, including 2 to All-State safety Josiah Weaver. So for Moscow, it's Garrison, I'm having a hard time figuring out this team, because you look at their 2 wins this year, and they were dominant over a pair of Washington schools, right? 40-33 over Clarkston, and then 47-7 over Pullman. And then they also beat Grangeville, but that was pretty low scoring, 16-8. And so you look at 3 of their games, 16 points against Grangeville, 16 points in a loss to Timberlake, and then 12 points in a loss to Lake City. It seems like the offense is there, and then all of a sudden there's times where they really struggle.
Yeah, the only consolation I can think of is that their defense has always showed up. Maybe not enough in some cases, as they suffered some losses. That is what it is, especially when they run into good teams. But their defense has been quite impressive throughout this first half of the season here. But you're right, the offense has really surprised me, and we knew there was going to be a transition period, especially when they have a brand new quarterback coming into play. But he had numerous weapons surrounding him. and veteran weapons as well. So, but that being said, offense is always harder and usually is the one that has to catch up to the defense early on in the season. And now the thing to take into consideration is one of those wins against Pullman. Pullman has looked terrible this season. So, as impressive as Moscow was going out and putting up the points and finishing the job, we got to take that into consideration too. Lake City is a talented team. And defensively, they did a great job. So for Moscow, as they look ahead to Lewiston, that defense better show up ready to go because Lewiston's defense isn't going to slouch either. So Moscow, tough task, unfortunately. But last year, they got the win against Lewiston. So it's going to be interesting to see how each of these two teams match up.
Yeah, so it's going to be, I think it's nice that Lewiston had that close nail biter with Sandpoint, right? Because Moscow's been in a lot of close one-score games this year, it seems like. And so Moscow's battle tested. Lewiston is finally battle tested, coming off of a loss. I think this is setting up very badly for Moscow. If I'm being honest here, Lewiston has looked very good this year, an explosive offense. They're probably pretty angry after losing at Sandpoint. That's a game they probably thought they could have had. And I think Moscow's walking into a buzzsaw. That's me personally. I don't know how you see it, but
no, I 100% see where you're coming from. And I, as the play-by-play guy, we have to be neutral. But at the same time, a defense typically can only hang on for so long, at least in high school football. There may be some dominant college or NFL defenses that can just grind a game to a halt. But on the high school level, a good offense is typically going to beat a good defense. And with Lewiston, they've got a great offense, and nobody has really figured them out yet. So Moscow's defense, I assume, is going to be able to hang with it for a while. But Lewiston, they just keep coming at you in waves and waves every single play. You make a good stop on, maybe you force a loss of yards on one play. They're right back to the line of scrimmage, setting up for the next play, ready to come at you in another way. Hand it off to somebody else or throw a quick screen pass, or maybe they're throwing a slant route over the top. They're just mixing it up constantly, and they've got weapons all over the field. So for Moscow, you're right. I think they have a tough task in front of them, especially if the offense doesn't show up or it has been inconsistent like it has all season.
Yeah. And one last thing, this is a game that we will have for you on IdahoSports.com. We will have video coverage Friday night as Moscow travels to Lewiston. One last thing about Lewiston I want to mention, it because we don't talk about it all the time, right? We talk about all these skill guys they have and the great talent they have. That offensive line is tremendous. And a lot, and same thing on the defensive side. Lewiston's defensive line is imposing. And I think a lot of their success this year has come from the trenches. As somebody who has seen Lewiston a couple of times up close and in person, can you kind of describe what this group of linemen is like? I think it's a really underreported story.
100%. And my co-host Jason Hansen's probably pulling his hair out watching this, saying, "You never talk about the linemen." So the reason that Lewiston's running attack has been so effective, of course, it's great to have Cruz Hepburn back, 100%. But he wouldn't be able to do what he's been able to do were it not for this offensive line creating the holes and separation that it has been. On top of that, they've provided Jace McArcher with a ton of time when he's dropping back to pass, or even if he does have to scramble, they're working hard to pursue the play and make sure they're protecting their quarterback by any means necessary. And on top of that, they don't make many mistakes. There haven't been many penalties against them this season that I can think of. So it's a well-disciplined offensive line. And then when you flip it over to the defensive line, they are consistently pressuring the opposing quarterback or just in the backfield in general. So when the other team's looking to make a handoff, you can find a purple shirt somewhere in the backfield. When the quarterback's dropping back to pass, there are hands up on the defensive line. So maybe they're covering up passing lanes, or they are blitzing linebackers in from the side because the defensive line has been such a problem that they have extra blockers there to help. And next thing you know, linebackers are coming in from all sorts of different gaps, whether it be the A gap, B gap, C gap, whatever. They are the lines free up this to do what they do. And that has been such an important part to this Lewiston attack. And yeah, like you said, they don't get enough credit. And they have been truly one of the foundations of Lewiston's success this season.
Absolutely. So Moscow at Lewiston, Friday night, 7:00 on IdahoSports.com with Garrison Hardie and Jason Hansen. It's going to be a great time. So let's move on to the 2A CIL Central Idaho League quickly. How about Orofino getting their first win of the season, traveling to Marcin? I said on last week's Prepcast that this was going to be a very winnable game for Orofino. Marcin is a team that is really struggling. They had one win coming in. Orofino was winless, but I thought the Maniacs were definitely the better team in this matchup, and they proved it in a 31-0 shutout. It's nice to see Orofino get off the schneid.
Oh, 100%. Just such a great feeling for that program. We talked about how their entire conference was shut down because of COVID last year. They only got to play one game. So they lost all that potential game experience for those players and then had to come into this season with a little bit of uncertainty. That I don't think people realize how valuable game time is for whether it be for a young player or a veteran. So to lose 7 or 8 games off of a schedule just in the drop of a hat, that was really tough on that program. So to see all that hard work and the persistence, the perseverance rather, of this program to come back out and get that win, that's got to be such a good feeling for those players. And I couldn't be more happy for them.
Absolutely. And for Grangeville, their hard season continues as they played an undefeated Kellogg team, but they actually hung pretty tough with the Wildcats. They did lose 33-21. Grangeville is now 1-4 overall. But again, we've talked about their strength of schedule is off the charts, and they're kind of looking ahead to the conference play. If we can win the league, then it doesn't matter what our win-loss record is. But Grangeville is a team that is getting better, and you can't look at just their record, but
that's right. And this is, again, a program with a lot of tradition and history to it. So they kind of remind me if I'm looking at the collegiate version, they remind me of a Fresno State or BYU. They don't care who you are. They are going to schedule you, and they're going to try to punch above their weight if they need to. And they have numerous times, by the way. They consistently beat some of these bigger schools in the past. This year, it just hasn't gone their way. But they have that same tough mentality. And like you said, the back end of their schedule is really where it gets interesting and where it's important. If they're able to win their conference, they can sneak in with a less than appealing record to some people, but they can absolutely get in if they take care of business on the conference side of things. And maybe, if they're able to bounce back at some point throughout the rest of the season, pick up another win too, that only bolsters their case. Their strength of schedule is, like you said, off the charts. I mean, some of the matchups they've had to take on are brutal. So the selection committee is going to consider that as the season moves forward.
Yeah, and I should mention Orofino's schedule's been pretty tough as well. The game against Marcin was their first game against a 2A opponent this year. They've had 3 3A opponents besides that. What's going to be interesting as we get closer towards the end game of the season here, Garrison, is St. Mary's is once again, this happened last fall, and it has happened again this year, where they are on hiatus because of COVID-19. They are in remote learning, and their athletic director, Todd Gilkey, told us that all activities at St. Mary's High School are canceled until October 11th, at least. So that is, you're looking at least 2 weeks where St. Mary's is not going to be competing, and it's going to cause a crunch in the schedule. And I'm not sure how they're going to figure that out yet, because it's a 3-team league, which means you need 3 weeks for everybody to play each other, right? And St. Mary's was scheduled to play Grangeville on October 8th. Well, they're not going to be able to play until at least the 11th, but Grangeville has games to fill those last 2 weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see how they figure that out, but it looks like we could be headed towards another headache in the 2A CIL, just like last year.
Yeah, and the schools will get resourceful if they need to, I'm sure. In the end, kids want to play. So if an athletic director from another school is a similar situation, especially I kind of thought this might happen as we head towards the winter and colder season, is that cases would just start appearing. I thought that might happen. So we may see some cancellations here and there. That being said, I think the schools are going to be a little bit more individual in some of their decision making. So maybe they'll be able to piece something else together or something like that. In the end, the kids and the coaches will want to play. So I don't foresee of a headache as it was last year, but all in all, you're right. This could get really interesting here in the coming weeks as we continue to move on into the season. I'm just glad I'm not one of those athletic directors.
Yeah. I don't honestly right now, I don't envy anybody that's in the education field, teachers, athletic directors. It's really hard for them right now because no matter what decision they make, somebody is going to be upset with them. And so there's just no way to win, which is unfortunate. So, yeah. So anyways, we will move on to the 1A ranks, tell you what happened in the White Pine League. But first, let's step aside and take a break. We'll hear from our sponsor here on the Palouse Prepcast, the Idaho Division of Public Health. That was a good transition, I feel like, talking about St. Mary's having school closures because of illness. And now let's hear from the Idaho Division of Public Health, and we'll be right back here on the Palouse Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
It's time to start planning for back to school. That's why I got my kids vaccinated for COVID-19. Kids 12 and older can get vaccinated. The vaccines have been researched and tested. They're safe and they work. And I hope everyone will choose to get vaccinated too.
Welcome back to the Palouse Prepcast. I'm Brandon Baney. He's Garrison Hardie. Let's dive into the White Pine League. Let's start at the 1AP1 level. Let's start with the game you were at on Saturday as Logos hosted Clearwater Valley. CP came in with an 0-3 record, but those 3 losses were to Raft River, Prairie, Genesee, 3 teams that were ranked in the top 5 this past week. And boy, the Rams had a lot of pent-up aggression, I feel like, and they took it to them in an 82-44 win. What did you see?
Oh yeah, and that was the biggest avalanche of points I have ever seen in a half. 54 points in the second half. And folks, let me tell you, that score line is deceiving. All right. And throughout the first half, Logos led numerous times. It was a back and forth game. Both offenses were humming. Both defenses were just trying to catch their breath and wondering what the heck is going on. It was an incredibly entertaining game. Jason and I had a blast. But then I spoke to Coach Holloway at church, actually. Just said, we came out incredibly flat in the second half. There's no other way to put it. And Clearwater Valley came out really bad, wanting to finish on a strong note and get that first win of the season. And you touched on that. Clearwater Valley 0-3. Logos was 1-3 coming to that. Both teams on 3-game losing streaks, and one of those streaks had to end. That was the theme coming into that game. And Clearwater Valley, they had the talent. You and I talked about that earlier in the season. Everybody had them kind of in the top conversation when it came to the White Pine League. So, Clearwater Valley came in, executed in the second half. They worked hard. They wanted it. They played good, hard football. The IdahoSports.com player of the game, Anthony Fabi, boy, did he have a great second half quarterback for Clearwater Valley.
Yeah, so like you said, it was kind of deceiving because Logos did hang tough for a half, and then it's hard when you've got all this excitement and buzz around. There was stuff going on besides the football game, right? The 40-year anniversary celebration. How hard is it as a player to, every school has homecoming and senior night and those things, but how hard is it to block out those kind of distractions when there's an event, beyond the football game that's happening?
For a lot of players, I don't think it's that big of a deal. That being said, because this is Logos's first ever year of varsity football, and as I talked to assistant coach J.C. Christensen and Nick Holloway at church, some of these kids with Logos have never even watched a football game before. They just don't. They're that inexperienced when it comes to the sport in general. So when you throw in something like the 40th year anniversary, a concert, a big crowd showing up in attendance, a lot of influential people within the Logos community were there too. So when you throw that kind of pressure in on top of it for kids who have never even watched a game of football before, that I could 100% see that playing into maybe the distraction in the second half. And they just don't know how to necessarily finish a game out yet, according to Coach Holloway. So, and we definitely saw that. Whereas Clearwater Valley, they have the discipline. They've been in those tough games. They've been in some heart. They have the talent to finish those games out. Logos, I think they'll be there, but that was not their day.
Yeah, and it was not Genesee's day either. I think that was probably the other really surprising result from the weekend's action in the White Pine League. Lapway just ran past Genesee 70-36. Both teams are now 3-1, but Lapway is 3-0 in the league, and Genesee is 3-1 in the White Pine.
Jason and I were talking about that score during the game. That probably surprised us the most out of anything we had seen. Genesee, they looked incredibly solid throughout the season thus far, and they beat some pretty quality opponents, including Clearwater Valley. So to see that score this year out, obviously, from my understanding, did he play in that game?
I know he had missed the game prior. And so I'm not
prior. Okay. So Titus year out, obviously paying dividends. And it just goes to show Lapway has athletes and always will. They work hard. They play hard. The coaches there are smart and intelligent. They know how to set their team up for success. But yeah, I was blown away by that blowout. I fully expected Genesee there towards the end, but all credit goes to Lapway there, just going out and finishing the job. And suddenly, a team that nobody really talked about early on in the season as being a contender, suddenly I could very well see them matching up pretty solidly with Prairie. This Prairie team, they've lost a lot of weapons from years past, and they've been impressive thus far. But I really think once we'll see what Prairie's made of when they run into Lapway. I think that's going to be the matchup that we're all going to be keeping an eye on going forward here in the White Pine.
Yeah, that Lapway game was impressive. 521 total yards of offense for the Wildcats. Titus year out did play, and he threw 1, 2, 3 touchdowns in that victory, and he had a touchdown run as well. And like you said, the score can be deceiving. It was 14-14 after one quarter of play, but in the second quarter, Lapway outscored Genesee 28-8, and from there, the race was on. So,
right.
Yeah, if we look at the White Pine standings, Prairie is 3-0. Lapway is also 3-0. Prairie last week played Potlatch and won 64-28. Nothing too surprising there. And then the other interesting game was Kamei taking on Troy. And Kamei is a team that we think could be a sleeper. And they made enough plays to win 28-20. And so Kamei is now 2-1 on the season and 2-1 in the White Pine League, only a half game behind Genesee. So the standings look like this. It's Prairie and Lapway, both 3-0. Genesee in third right now, 3-1. Kamei is fourth at 2-1, and then you got Potlatch and Clearwater Valley each 1-2. That top six is pretty talented top to bottom. It's going to be interesting to see.
Absolutely. I look for Clearwater Valley to start carving their way back into that deficit that they find themselves in. They do have the talent. It's just been a rough start to the season, and that win against Logos was a good way to get the ship heading in the right direction. Again, I think the big one is going to come down to Prairie and Lapway. Kamei, yeah, we don't know. I think as somebody who's never had the fortune of covering them, I think they could very well sneak in. That's just the exciting thing about White Pine football and high school football in general. That's why none of this is played on paper. We the experts can come in and make our predictions and whatnot, and the kids will go out and write the story instead. And we've seen that throughout this season thus far. I'm excited to see as these games continue to move along where the chips are going to start falling and piling up. Obviously in the past, but we see the winds of change here for Lapway. or maybe even another team sneaks up into the conversation. Genesee, I think, is still a threat, even though they got punched on the nose there. We'll see what they're made of in the next week, if they have a chance to respond and get back on the right track. So still a lot of good football left ahead of us.
Yeah, Camia's got a lot of good guys that were part of that baseball team last year. They got to state for the first time since 2002. Willis Williamson is a great running back. Brady Cox is a good player. David Clute is the quarterback for Camii, and he's looked pretty sharp as well. So, yeah, can never count out those Camii Cubs. And so if we look at the White Pine League schedule for this week, it sets up to be pretty interesting. Prairie is at Camii. I guess we're going to find out real quick how good Camii is, right? Hosting
Right.
Prairie. And that 1-2 backfield of Brody Hasselstrom and TJ Hibbard, that is a tough 1-2 combo to stop in the backfield. Here's another good game. Clearwater Valley at Lapway. Is this, you said CB is going to start punching their way up the standings, that this is a prime opportunity to take out a team that's undefeated in the league. What a result that would be.
Oh, 100%. And Clearwater Valley, Lapway has athletes, obviously, but so does Clearwater Valley. Dylan Pickering is one that jumps to mind as a guy who has the ability to make a difference both on the offense and the defensive side. Logos just couldn't tackle him. He's that powerful coming out of the backfield. And then Anthony Fabi at quarterback, he's pretty darn mobile himself when in comparison to Titus Yearout. So both of these teams have kind of the athletes in similar spots. So I'm not sure how many points they'll be putting up, but maybe it looks like a basketball score. We'll see.
Yeah, that's for sure. The other 1A D1 White Pine games, Genesee at Troy, good opportunity for the Bulldogs to bounce back. And then Logos at Potlatch. I think this is a game that Logos has a great chance of maybe getting that first conference win of the season against the Potlatch team that came out hot and then has cooled off a little bit. So, yeah.
Right. Potlatch certainly has some great players. One that jumps to mind, Isaac, IdahoSports.com player of the game when we covered Potlatch versus Deary. And then Logos, they have their own athletes in Solomon Howard and Aiden Elmore. That's what I was going to say. There we go. So Logos has their own athletes too. So, even though the records may not be as polished as some of the more powerful and established teams, they still got some good kids out there that can go out and make plays. And you're right. I think if Logos wants to pick up a win in conference, this would be a good one to jump on, as well as Troy maybe down the road.
Yeah. And now if we take a look at finally the 1A D2 White Pine League, I said a couple of weeks ago that I thought Lewis County was the second best team in the league. I thought with Deary being down a little bit and Timberline still building its program back up after a little hiatus, I thought this was Lewis County's opportunity to kind of jump into that second spot and get a playoff bid. And of course, Kendrick is still top dog in the league, and they proved it when Lewis County traveled to Kendrick Friday night. Tigers won 82-12. So even if Lewis County is the second best team, which I think, still a pretty big gap between Kendrick and everybody else.
Yeah, it's clearly Kendrick's show this season. Deary is in a little bit of a rebuild mode. And then, I thought Lewis County could I still assumed Kendrick would win, but I didn't see that coming. So they've got the athletes, they've got the talent, and they have in the past too. So Kendrick, once again, finding ways to be dominant, finding ways to win and come out on top. And we could very well once again be seeing a Kendrick playoff run here.
The other two teams that matched up, Timberline and Deary, and Timberline ended up scoring the game-winning touchdown in an 18-12 win with about 3 minutes to play in the game. Parker Brown hit Micah Nelson for a 78-yard back-breaking touchdown with about 3 minutes to go. And Timberline representing Weippe well, an 18-12 win over Deary, which means they are 1-0 in the White Pine League to start things off. And we talked about Timberline made the playoffs last year for the first time in a long time. They went 4-4. They've had some illness problems this year where they've had to cancel a game or two, but maybe now the conversation is Timberline and Lewis County, who gets that second spot.
Right. Well, when Jason and I were there covering the Logos versus Timberline game, it was clear that Timberline had talent and they had athletes. And if I'm remembering correctly, they had a couple of their better players missing from that game. So who knows? Maybe that game plays out a little bit differently. Logos probably still has the edge just because of the number of bodies that they had, but still, Timberline, they could very well be making a push for that second place spot. They have talented kids and they have the playoff experience from the year before, and the coaching staff that got them there. So for me, Timberline, I think I would probably give the edge just heading towards playoff time.
And Timberline will play Lewis County in Weippe Friday, October 15th. So, yeah, we kind of have this opening weekend of conference play, right? The 4 conference teams playing each other. And, well, there's only 4 teams. So now we're kind of back into non-conference play for a week or two. And then we'll finish the season with the rest of the conference matchups. Kind of an interesting way to do it. But that's kind of the rundown of the football scene. Volleyball, I just want to mention real quick that the coaches' polls just came out for volleyball. And again, the 1A D1 coaches poll, Troy, the number 1 team, Potlatch, the number 2 team, with Genesee and Prairie right there, threatening to burst into the top 5. Those are the top 4 teams in the White Pine League. That is going to be a fascinating district tournament in October.
Absolutely. I mean, we've already seen Potlatch's ability to rack up wins, and then we've seen Troy's dominance led by Morgan Blazard as kind of the spearhead to that attack and her athleticism. And then the rest of the players on that Troy team are just incredibly disciplined and know where to be, know where to fill in the gaps. Genesee, I think, could be a sleeper as somebody who's been around the program as their PA announcer before. They have talent in Lucy Ranasat, as well as a couple of others. So for me, I wouldn't. And then Prairie, I always feel like you can never count out Prairie just by their tradition, even in other sports. So for Prairie, that like you said, that top 4 is going to be very interesting to watch as the weeks continue on.
A couple of assumptions you can make about Prairie. They're probably going to be good, and there's probably a Shears or a Eulencott that's making plays, right?
Or a Hasselstrom at some point. We'll see.
Yes, for sure. So, and then I did want to give a shout out to Kendrick. They're ranked 3rd in the 1A D2 coaches poll. They were so good last year in girls basketball, getting all the way to the 1A D2 state title game. A lot of those girls play volleyball, including Erin Morgan, who's a great all-around athlete. And then Orofino just missed out on the top 5 in the 2A ranks as well. I think Orofino is the favorite to win that conference and represent its state. So a lot of exciting volleyball action up north in District 2 as well. So yeah,
we've got the beautiful scenery, we've got the great sports, and don't you people down in Boise forget about us. We bring a lot to the table too. So
that's right. Don't sleep on the Palouse. That's for sure. No doubt about it. So yeah, this Friday night, Garrison is going to be on the call for Moscow at Lewiston football showdown. Kickoff 7:00 Friday night right here on IdahoSports.com, live and free video coverage. That's going to be super exciting. So we'll come on back next week and talk about all the football action again. Probably going to be some more video game scores from the White Pine League, I'm sure. And, probably from Lewiston. There's a lot of offense up north. That's for sure.
100%. Yeah, the defense has seemed to go by the wayside this season, at least. I've been a part of defensive grudge matches too, but none of that this year. So offense full steam ahead, and I think that was a lot of frustration from last year, pent up from missing all those games. So the kids just wanted to get out there and score some touchdowns, and we've seen that.
Yeah, no doubt. Always scoring touchdowns here on the Palouse Prepcast. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. The Palouse Prepcast brought to you by the Idaho Division of Public Health. For Garrison Hardie, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you back here next time on IdahoSports.com.